Wow, I have never seen that before.
Hello everyone, thanks for nipping into the video. This is the third attempt I've made at doing this video. So I'm a huge fan of Claire North, and this is my attempt to say why she's really good and to talk about 5 of her books in more detail. So I've read 6 of her books, and one of her books I haven't got because I got it from the library, which is The Pursuit of William Abbey, which is a really good book. That was one of her most recent ones, and it was really good. But I'm going to skip over that one because I can't show it. And I've got 5 others I want to talk about, and there's one, where is that one? There's one, I need to read this one, 84K, I haven't read this one, and I also need to read End of the Day as well, which I haven't got. So let me tell you something about Claire North first. So you may have heard of her, I don't know, her most famous book is The First 15 Lives of Harry August, which I'll get to in a minute. So you may have heard of that book. She's been writing since 2002, and she's actually got 3 names. So her real name is Catherine Webb, and she wrote, when she first started, she wrote YA stuff, and then she decided to focus on fantasy, and she changed her writing name to Kate Griffin, and she wrote a number of books under the name Kate Griffin, and they were really successful as well. And then she changed her name to Claire North, and that was because she wanted to do a different kind of writing, and she's got a recognisable style as Claire North, I think, but I find it really difficult to pin down. It's not always very easily definable as science fiction. It crosses the boundary between science fiction and fantasy, and there are elements of historical fiction in there as well in some of what she does, but the way she writes is quite consistent. It's not absolutely consistent because I think there's 2 different sides to Claire North, which I'll get to in a minute. But the way she describes things and the way she paints the world building side of it is quite consistent, I think. I think she's amazing. I think that of all the people I've read that are younger writers, so rather than these old duffers or the ones that have died that have been around forever, she's definitely one of my favourites, if not my favourite. So I absolutely love what she does. So she's apparently just released a new hardback called Ithaca, which is an ancient Greece fictionalized story around the Odysseus story. So I don't know much about it, but I've just quickly seen the cover advertised on the Waterstones website and a little blurb about it. So that's going to be a bit different for her. Although again, she's dipped into that territory a little bit in a more fantasy / science fiction way. But Claire North is amazing. I'm going to talk about Games House first, because this was the first book I read by her. So Game House came out in 2002, and it initially came out as 3 short novellas. So it was The Serpent, and then The Thief, and then The Master. And they're 3 different stories that are tied together, if you like, in the last one, The Master. So it does tie them together, but they are separate stories, and they're all based around this big conceptual thing called the Games House, which is a fantastic idea. And it's one of those things where huge, life-changing, world-changing games are being played, where the board of the game is literally the whole world. So the first story is The Serpent, and that's set in 17th century Venice, and the main character of that story is a character called Thene, and Thene discovers that her husband is a gambler, goes to the games house, gets involved, and discovers some skill in gambling and playing games, and there's this sort of question about whether or not they can get to this higher level game, which is when you get into gambling geographical areas and toppling kings and queens and all big scale stuff like that. So the sort of plot kind of develops like that, and it's a really interesting development of this gaming idea. and it does just introduce the concept really well. And then the second novella is called The Thief. This is the fastest paced one, and it's quite it's the one that's probably the easiest read out of the three. And that is set in 1930s Thailand, and a character called Remy ends up drunk, wakes up, and has got involved in this crazy version of hide and seek, where the whole of Thailand is the board, if you like, the area that they can hide or seek. And what he's done is he's bet all of his memories against his challenger's life. So that's the stakes, and that's the geographical area where the hide and seek can take place in. And it's really thrilling, and it's brilliantly done. And then the third novella is called The Master, and that's set in present day, and that's about a character called Silver, who gets involved in the game's house. And again, these huge epic games are being played out, and it kind of ties the three of them together. It's brilliant. It might take you a while to get used to the writing style, but it's absolutely worth it. So that was the first one I read by her, and I was absolutely blown away. I thought I need to read more. And then this one kept looking at me in the shelves. This one, Touch. So this came out initially in 2015, and there was something about it, and I read the back, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And this is my favourite Claire North book. It's one of my all-time favourite books. I've raved about it a few times on the channel. I absolutely love it. And even though everyone loves Harry August for all the right reasons, it is brilliant. This one I love even more. I love the concept more. The sort of peculiarities about the plot and the sort of central conceit and what you can do with it, I think, is more interesting in this as well. I'll tell you what it is. So there's a character called Kepler, who is a being that can travel, or has to travel, between different bodies, and basically possesses someone to be alive. That's the only way they can stay alive, is by possessing these people. And they can travel into these people just by touching them. So as soon as they, listen, it's not clear what gender Kepler is. As soon as they touch someone, they go into their body, and they are that person for however long Kepler is in that body. So it could be seconds, it could be minutes, it could be years. And that concept is really explored so well in the book. So when it's seconds, like the book starts with a chase, so it starts very fast with the chase, and you don't know why they're being chased straight away, and it kind of the plot kind of develops. And there's an antagonist in the book as well that is really making the second half of the book really intense. But so this idea that Kepler can be in a body for years has a lot of consequences. Like, there's guilt that Kepler feels once they leave, because what they've done is they've left this body completely confused about why all these things have happened in their life that they weren't privy to, because they were just sort of blank slate while Kepler possessed them. So if they're in there for years, literally their entire life has changed, and they had no knowledge of it or control over it. And they sort of just wake up and they're like, what's going on? So Kepler does feel guilty about that. But also, Kepler kind of gets attached to the bodies that they control and possess. And that comes into play fairly early in the beginning, because she's trying to figure out, they're trying to figure out why someone was murdered that they possessed. And it's just, the pace of it's amazing. The actual the way that Claire North develops the concept into real detailed descriptions and investigations into how Kepler would sense different things in different bodies, how the senses work, and how Kepler might realise that someone's about to have a serious illness because they can feel it in the body, and that person doesn't realise yet, and those kind of things. But the smells and the feel of the body, the difference in having different bodies, an old body that aches a lot and feels old, as opposed to a young body that feels totally different. All those kind of things are explored so well in the book, and it's just it's fascinating. It's really fast. It's a brilliant story. You really care for Kepler and a few of the other characters that are in it, and it's such a brilliant read, and it's a really good ending. So yeah, I couldn't overstate how much I love this book. So Touch, Claire North. And then I read the most famous of her books, which is the first 15 lives of Harry August. So this came out in 2014, and this was her first book as Claire North. So presumably she was writing as Kate Griffin. She had this idea and she wanted to write it, but she felt like it didn't really fit into the Kate Griffin works. So she needed to market it differently, and obviously having a different name immediately gives you a different marketing strategy, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, everybody loves this book. It's so clever, but it's also really thrilling. You really want to know what happens next. You care for everybody that's in it. You care for Harry August. He's got a really interesting problem. The idea is that when he dies, he gets reborn into his own body and retains all of his memories. So it's a bit of a Groundhog Day thing, but it's not done as comedy. It's done really dramatically, because he finds out, as he has these lives, he finds out that the world's about to end, and it's getting worse each time he goes through another life. That's becoming sooner and sooner, and he has to try and do something about it, and he gets connected to these other people that have got a similar issue, and they're passing messages to each other through these sort of reborn lives. And it's so well crafted. It's really interesting, and it's got a brilliant ending again. And it's just one of those books that, you know, I'm sure if you've heard of it, read it. If you haven't heard of it, then you probably will do soon, because people will talk about it all the time. It's such a good book. So first 15 lives of Harry August, really good. So then I read this one, because this was a new release at the time, Notes from the Burning Age, and this is slightly different to her other books. It's got a different feel to it, I think, but I'll go on about the two different sides of her writing in a moment. So this is a bit of a slightly dystopian, hugely post-apocalyptic, futurist landscape, futurist society, and it came out in 2021, by the way. I didn't say that. It came out in 2021, so it's very, very recent. This is her most recent one, if you don't count the one that's just about to come out, Ithaca. So Ven is a monk whose job is to translate these old texts he finds to find useful things about history, but also to make sure that the society avoids repeating the mistakes by getting influenced by bad ideas that are in old texts. So he's doing that, and then he gets contacted by someone from a rebellion that is trying to uncover other texts, and he's giving him other things to translate, and he's got this moral dilemma, and he's got to try and figure out what he should do to possibly improve society, but there's this danger of it being made worse, and this huge cataclysm to happen again. And it's very complicated. It's very steeped in espionage, trust, loyalty, distrust. The idea that Ven, the main character, is torn all the time. There's some set pieces, these dramatic events that change the course of the plot. It's very densely written, much more densely written by a lot of her others, I think. There's a lot of world building in it, and there's some things that are confusing at first and get clarified as you read it. But it is beautifully written. But it's just, I think it's one that just takes a little bit more of that concentration. You can't skip through it, and the pace is different as well. So it's a slower pace. I think it's quite bleak. I watched an interview with her yesterday. There was an online chat with N.K. Jemisin, which was really good to see. But Claire North said that part of the reason for writing this was she wanted to write something that was like the futurist utopia, because everybody writes bleak things about the future. I thought this was quite a bleak book, so I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if that's intentional or if I got the wrong end of the stick as I was reading it, but I do think it's got this sort of bleakness running through it. There is the sense of these people trying to hold on to a brighter future by making sure the past doesn't get repeated, but it is very dark. It's very dark. And then the last book I want to talk about is from 2016. This is another one of my favourites by her, and this is The Sudden Appearance of Hope. And I've done a separate video just about this book already, but I'd need to include this in this video about her as an author because it's so good. And it's definitely, I've got 3 favourites, if you like, of the 6 I've read, and there's this one, Touch, and Harry August are the 3 favourites for me. But this has got a central conceit where Hope is a character who has this condition where if she leaves somebody's company, they've completely forgotten about her existence. She doesn't exist in their eyes. And that creates a whole load of consequences in her family, with her friends, with her schooling, where everything about her is obviously affected by the fact that nobody ever retains the knowledge that she exists if she leaves their company. It's all brand new. So she can't interact with her parents properly. She's got an interesting relationship with her sister that runs through the whole book, and that's slightly different. And basically this condition means that she is eternally lonely. She's got real trouble with feeling connected. There's a whole thread of this disconnection, but it also gives her the freedom to do whatever she wants. So that's explored as well, because the consequences aren't quite so severe as if they would be for a normal person. And basically she becomes a thief, which is inevitable, right? And also she uncovers a conspiracy by a social network media conglomerate company that are trying to control people, and she wants to kind of knock the company down by exposing what it's doing. So there's loads of things going on in this book. It's a bit of a thriller based around this sort of conspiracy with this company. There's this really well explored problem that Hope's got that causes issues with her relationships and her sense of disconnection, and these things tie together beautifully because one results in the other, if you like. So yeah, fantastic book. Again, very fast paced. So I wanted to talk a little bit about those 2 different styles that she's got. So she's either got this fast paced thriller thing that are in my 3 favourite books of hers, and they're very short chapters. The descriptions are really well realised and she writes really well, but it isn't laboured too much. And then you've got this other side to what she does, which would be the case for the Games House books or novellas, Notes from the Burning Age, and The Pursuit of William Abbey. Those 3, I think, have got this other side to them where the pace is much slower. There's much more of a contemplative, reflective feel in the narrative, and that world building is a lot more densely done. But in all 6 books, I think there is a consistency that you can tell that's Claire North as well. So yeah, she's amazing. Check her out. Buy any of those books, but obviously go for the most famous ones if you like first, if you want to go in with toes first. But yeah, she's amazing. So Catherine Webb, Kate Griffin, Claire North. Go find her books. Thanks a lot. Bye.